need to understand, now that we've come to the place that we're at, where we understand that really there's an infinite amount of worlds, and really there's just four essential kinds of worlds that we're discussing when we say the four worlds of Abiyah. So we need to understand, what is it that makes these four worlds unique? What is it that makes them stand out? That we've decided that we're going to put so much effort and so much investment into categorizing these worlds and discussing all of the intricacies surrounding them. We say there are infinite worlds. I mean, you need to focus on something, but why focus on these four? And also, we need to understand, what is it that makes them worlds? Imagine, I would say, that the sphere of Chesed, it has a lot going on for itself. It's very hashpah, like whatever I can embellish in the sphere of Chesed. And I can say the sphere of Chesed actually contains within itself all of the spheres. We all count sphere Sa'emer, and sphere Sa'emer, we say Chesed Sheba Chesed, Chesed Sheba Gvura, at least the Kabbalistic things, technically, halachically, you don't need to, but typically speaking, this is what people do. And so we all are probably familiar with the idea that Chesed includes many different aspects within itself. So why can't I say Chesed is a world of Chesed? I mean, it says Olam Chesed Yavan, Hashem made the world with Chesed. Maybe you could say that Chesed itself is some kind of world, and that's why when Hashem creates the world, He takes one world and makes it into another world, which is, by the way, a very similar concept to what we're actually saying happens with the four worlds of Abiyah, which we'll get to in Hashem at some point. But why not say that the world of Chesed is a world? Or I don't know that I could say the world of Chesed, because Chesed isn't actually a world. So this is what the Frierdiker Rebbe sets out immediately after describing the concept of the four worlds, why it is that we care about them, the fact that there's Alma Deskalia and Alma Deskasiyah, the concealed realms and the revealed realms, and also that those two have their own division into two, of the upper and the lower. You have Atzilus and Beriyah of Alma Deskasiyah, which is to say that they're from the concealed realms, and Yetzirah and Asiyah, which are from the lower realms. So the Frierdiker Rebbe immediately launches into explaining the fact that Atzilus in particular is actually a world. So it's very interesting. I'll get to this. I want to read a little bit of the text, and then we'll be able to discuss at length in our session. So the Frierdiker Rebbe says, the first world of these four worlds is the world of Atzilus. And then immediately he interjects. He says, seeing as it is an ordered world, with halls, Merkava, a chariot, Esher 10 spheres, Iris v'chelim, lights and vessels, Meichen u'mides, intellect and emotion, Era Chachma b'chliya Chachma, light of Chachma in a vessel of Chachma, Era Chesed b'chliya Chesed, and the light of Chesed in vessels of Chesed, Chesed meaning kindness. So Nikra Atzilus is Mishneh time. It's called Atzilus for two reasons. We'll stop here. We'll get to that in Res Hashem in a little bit. So, to back up for a second, the Frierdiker Rebbe feels the need to tell us why it is that Atzilus is actually a world. And the first thing on that list, perhaps, actually really brings out a very important point, that Atzilus, by a lot of stretches of the definition, or by a lot of, I don't know how to phrase it, but a lot of ways that we can frame the definition of a world, Atzilus shouldn't actually be a world. That isn't to say that Atzilus isn't a world. The Frierdiker Rebbe makes a very good argument for why Atzilus should be a world. But Atzilus is really a place where everything feels godliness as an inherent part of itself. Everything feels nullified to Hashem. The world, as we know it, is an existence. When we say the world, to us, that refers to everything in existence. The universe, perhaps, but not even the universe. The world, at least the word olam, contains everything. When we say an olam, a world, it means that an olam needs to have everything in it. To say that Atzilus has things in it is already a difficult statement, because in Atzilus, everything feels nullified to Hashem. There feels like there's only one existence. So to start saying that Atzilus is a world is already a little bit of a difficult statement. But then the Frierdiker Rebbe takes it and he says, I'm going to explain to you why Atzilus is actually a world. He says, because it's very ordered and it contains all of the elements necessary for a world. in the order that they need to be in. So the first thing that he lists to say as his proof that Atzilus is the world, he says that there's a cholis, there's chambers. Now chambers is a Kabbalistic concept, there's 7 of them, and corresponding to different middays, etc., etc. The point of the shir is not to explain a cholis, the point of the shir is to explain Olamais. But the Frierdiker Rebbe says that Atzilus has a cholis. Now that in itself is not a difficult statement, something that we take. Firstly, we're Chassidim. Whatever the Frierdiker Rebbe says, the Frierdiker Rebbe says, and that's that. But it's important to note that the idea of having a cholis in Atzilus is a little bit of a chiddush. It's not something that comes up in the Zohar, really. And it's almost implied, perhaps, that Atzilus doesn't have a cholis over there. In the Kabbalah of the Arizal, or Chaim Vital, it ends up becoming much more of a thing that Atzilus has a cholis. Now, when the Frierdiker Rebbe wrote this wasn't really a chiddush, but it's important to know that as far as perception went, calling Atzilus an Olam in the Zohar is not necessarily something which was well understood. Going back to the theme of last year, to say that Atzilus is the world, people probably did have this question for a while. Even the people that did understand Atzilus, how can we say that Atzilus is the world? Atzilus doesn't even have a cholis. So the cheap answer, if you will, is that Atzilus does have a cholis. Now, there's 2 ways that we'd be able to look at the statement that Atzilus has a cholis. The first way that we could look at it would be to say that Atzilus, just to explain, someone asked in the chat, cholis literally translates to halls. It's a Kabbalistic concept, which it would be nice to discuss. We'll get to a very vague definition soon in Yetzirah Hashem. But for right now, just say cholis is a thing to attribute to a world that you would say gives it the definition of a world. We'll get to that in Yetzirah Hashem. I'm getting there. But as for right now, it just means halls. So, in the world of Atzilus, we say that the last level of Atzilus, which is Malchus of Atzilus, the lowest level, it's the level of culmination of everything of Atzilus, that it comes to the point, the same way that a king receives taxes from everyone in the kingdom, and with those taxes is able to make infrastructure, the same way Malchus of Atzilus takes everything of Atzilus and filters it down, and it's able to make the next world, the world of Beriyah, take it down a level, make it more practical. So Malchus of Atzilus, we say, becomes Keser of Beriyah, which is to say that it becomes the highest level of what comes after it. The king receives from everyone, because that's what a king does. He takes the taxes from everyone. He's the culmination point of everything in the country, goes back to the king ultimately. But then the king is also at the top of making the infrastructure of the country. So Malchus of Atzilus contains within itself the entirety of Atzilus, but it's still part of Atzilus. But at the same time, it functions in the exact way as Keser of Beriyah, as the highest level of Beriyah. So it would, in theory, be possible to say that Atzilus contains within itself a cholis. Why? Because Atzilus contains within itself Malchus of Atzilus. Malchus of Atzilus, the lowest level of Atzilus, technically speaking, needs to have everything from what it gives to. And one of the things that Malchus of Atzilus makes is cholis. So, perforce we must say that Atzilus contains cholis in a very limited sense, that Malchus of Atzilus does contain cholis. So, it would be a tempting thing to say. The thing is that, as I'll explain in Yetzirah Hashem, the order that the Frierdiker Rebbe lists all of these things often seems to be from highest to lowest. So maybe it would be tempting to say, okay, well maybe it's not actually in any kind of given order, which usually that doesn't fly in Chabad Chassidus, because everything is in a very particular order. I mean, you see here that the Frierdiker Rebbe, the first thing that he says shouldn't make Atzilus the world is the fact that it's well ordered. We care very much about order in Chabad Chassidus. That being said, it's not just a diuk stam, because actually the Rebbe, if I'm not mistaken, someone wrote footnotes for this letter. If I'm not mistaken, it was the Rebbe. And in a footnote later, basically, the Frierdiker Rebbe also lists these things with the word v'chulu. But the thing is that he skips, if I'm not mistaken, Rakava. We'll get there when we get there. He skips one of the items on the list. And in the footnote, it says that this was a typographical error, and that really, you need to insert that thing, you need to insert the missing item in the list in its correct place. So we see that the Rebbe looked at this letter and said, okay, this letter, everything is very meduyek, the order, even though you could say that listing later has the word etc. You could say that the missing item is just included in the etc. But the Rebbe says, no, it's not included in the etc. And really, it needs to be in this exact place. So we see that the order over here is very particular. It could almost be said that the hashgacha process of the typographical error was to let us know that the order is particular, because otherwise a person might have been mistaken in thinking that the order isn't a particular order. Anyhow, I digress. So we see that Atzilus does have Heichalis, and that Heichalis is the highest place. So, as in it's the highest thing on this list. It's the highest here. So, to explain a little bit of what Heichalis are, someone asked in the chat already. So, Heichalis are literally translates to halls. Now, as far as the deep Kabbalistic meaning and all of the underpinnings, etc., again, this is a share on Eilamais, not on Heichalis. But I will say that as a very general mashal, what we could say is that Heichalis are a place for things to interact. And really it makes sense that that's the first thing that you need for a universe. Because if you would have only one thing, which by the way, Heichalis, without anything else in them, Heichalis are just space. They're space itself. You could have the universe and you could have only space and absolutely no matter, but at least you have the background, the backdrop for things to interact on. You need to have some kind of space. You need to have a place where everything can happen. So Heichalis are just that. Heichalis are a place for interaction. It's not the interaction itself, and it doesn't even contain within itself any entity besides for the space itself. It's just a space. It's a place where things can. It's a space where things can interact and exist. I see someone typed an explanation on the chat. Very good, Baruch Hashem. So yeah, that's what Heichalis are in the sense for what we're talking about. So moving on to the next level, it says the Frierdiker Rebbe writes that the next thing that Atzilus contains is Merkava. So very often when I see Merkava, and also to be fair, in the footnote over here in the English, it gives a whole explanation of the Merkava, the Kabbalistic underpinnings, and whatnot. It goes a little bit on a tangent over there, but as far as the purposes of what we're talking over here, there's something that I see very often missed when talking about Merkava. The Rambam, in his Sefer Yad Chazaka, Sefer of Halachis, as the Rebbe was very fond of pointing out, the Rambam actually describes Ma'aser Merkava, and in his description of Ma'aser Merkava, he actually gives no descriptions of chariots. He doesn't even describe the wheels. You almost feel like he sold you a boat instead of a Merkava. The Rambam tells you all about Ma'aser Merkava, and there's no mention of a Merkava, and he halachically defines this as Ma'aser Merkava. There's a few nuniki halachic applications of Ma'aser Merkava, which in this day and age, honestly, Chassidus has kind of dispensed with, the fact that we're giving a share on Zoom. Chassidus itself shows the idea, essentially, that the original halachic limitation of Ma'aser Merkava was that you're not allowed to darshan it in too small of a class. But nowadays, I mean, actually, tonight and this class is decently sized, but so technically, maybe we're not violating any of the older restrictions with this class. But ultimately, Ma'aser Merkava is the concept of hakava. It's the concept of combination. It's the concept of connection of different entities. We say that you have something that's murkav of two separate things. An example would be that of hakava would be grafting trees. It's called hakava in Lashon HaKodesh. That if you take a branch from one tree and you graft it onto another tree, that is to say that you establish the branch in another tree to the point that it nurtures from the roots of that tree. It's called harkava. And harkava in general means having two things that function as one. Same way you have a branch from a tree, it's nurturing from that tree, it produces fruits from that tree, it's still a separate branch. You could graft, an orange onto a lemon tree. Or a lot of people, one of the big halachic concerns with the surgim is the idea of grafting an esrog onto a lemon tree, because the lemon tree is very good at providing nutrients for the esrog, but at the same time it's not an esrog tree, it's a lemon tree. So, but it will produce esrog-looking fruits. Anyhow, so this is what harkava is. So harkava is a level in which everything is together, everything is mixed. You have a space, And you have now, in the space, you have entities, but not entities that exist as distinct entities. You have entities that exist as one unit, one unification, which is another step down from just having space. Space is just that there's a backdrop for things to happen. In our human, fleshy imaginations, when we imagine nothing, it's very, very difficult. I myself don't know that I'm able to do it. It's very difficult to imagine a nothingness taking place outside of space. Space is the most basic element of the universe that our imaginations have a very hard time dispensing of. So Kehos is really at the top of what a universe is. It's a place, it's a space for things to interact. The next step down is Merkava of saying that you have the notion of an existence in space. There is something. I could imagine a world without something in it. I could imagine just a base and empty space. But I can't really imagine. I can really imagine a world without anything. A world needs to have space. I could imagine a world without things in it. But now the Frierdiker Rebbe is introducing that Atzilus isn't just an empty space. Atzilus has something in it. Something which may be a great combination of everything, but at least something. But then, it's taken a step down. The Frierdiker Rebbe says that there's 10 spheres. There's 10 spheres. 10 spheres, and it says in Sefer Yetzirah, 10 spheres is 10 and not 9 and not 11. So, we see that 10 spheres is saying already that we have a separate, distinct amount of entities. That now there's different things going on. Maybe the 10 spheres all function together. They flow one into the other, but ultimately now we have 10 things that are distinct entities. So not only does Atzilus have a space, a backdrop for things, not only does Atzilus have an entity in it, Atzilus has distinct entities in it. Then the Frierdiker Rebbe goes on and he says that it contains, these 10 spheres are made with Eris and Kalim. Eris and Kalim is to say that it's a more practical sense of the 10 spheres. And to explain, we say that light, at least visible light, just to stick with visible light, that when you have a white light, that light actually contains within itself many different colors. It contains red, it contains blue, it contains green. If you put it through a filter, you'll be able to bring out only one of those colors. Now, white light is not actually one shade and that you're able to cut it in half or something like that. Really, it does actually contain within itself all of these different colors. It's not that it's all one. Really, we just can't appreciate each individual color. Our brains don't have the processing power for that. But really, it contains within itself actually all the separate colors. They are all distinct within the light. We just can't appreciate it. But they all exist there independently. It's not just one intense, extremely ultraviolet light. It's really separate colors. But through a filter, we're able to appreciate the distinctness of the colors. We're able to appreciate different shades. So this is the concept of Eris and Kalim in a general sense. This is a classic mashal in Chassidus. Usually it's with colored glasses, not with filters, but it's probably because no one had a need for flat pieces of glass or plastic to be able to filter out little pieces of light. But Eris and Kalim, light and vessels, that light is able to shine through a vessel, you're able to filter out one particular color. So what the Frierdiker Rebbe is saying here is that it goes further, not just to say that you have 10 spheres, but the 10 spheres are indistinguishable. The 10 spheres are distinguishable as separate entities. Not just that they exist and that they are separate entities, they're distinguishable as separate entities. Then the Frierdiker Rebbe says, Meichunu midos. That is to say, that not just that they all exist independently, but the same way that intellect, Meichen means intellect, midos means emotions, the same way that intellect flows into emotions, that a person has a thought, or not really a thought, a person has a knowledge about something going on in the world, and that causes them to have a feeling about something going on in the world. A person could see someone that they love, know, oh, this is a person that I know and that I love, or not that they know that they love them, but that they know who they are, what they are to them, and then they feel a love for that person. A person could see something that they dislike, they appreciate that they dislike it, and then they have an actual feeling of dislike. The knowledge of what's going on feeds into the emotion, and it gives birth to the emotion in a sense. So now, not only do we have 10 distinct spheres, and they all exist independently, and they're all doing their own thing. No, they actually flow into each other. There's a cause and effect going on. And the Frierdiker Rebbe finishes it off with Ura Chochma b'chli HaChochma v'Ura Chesed b'chli HaChesed, which is to say, the light of Chochma, the light of appreciation of knowledge, not just knowledge in the literal sense, but the appreciation of whatever it is that's at the beginning. The first step, you have the idea of starting out in a place. I'm speaking a little bit vaguely. Atzilus starts with the light of Chochma. That is the first thing in Atzilus, the idea that things can be known. Not just in Atzilus, this is how it is in every world. Chochma is always the first step. You have things which are higher than Chochma, but Chochma is always the first step in the chain of the 10 series. It's always the first step in the chain of cause and effect, particularly. First, you need to know something. After that, you can have whatever feeling. You could try to do whatever you want about it, but you need to first know something. So the Frierdiker Rebbe says that now things are going actually in full distinct steps where you have light of Chochma in a vessel of Chochma that it's appreciable as Chochma, as an individual aspect. It's there. It's something practical. The light of Chochma in the vessel of Chochma. And not only that, but it's able to have a complete effect on something else that ultimately is neshtalshel. It causes, through cause and effect, that a person should want to do something about it. Of chesed, light of kindness, of distribution, in a vessel of kindness and of distribution. So ultimately, the Frierdiker Rebbe, just so that we don't get lost in what we're talking about, the Frierdiker Rebbe says Atzilus is actually a world. It's a world. It has the backdrop for things to happen. It has entities. Not only does it have entities, but these entities are distinct. Not only are they distinct, but we're able to perceive them as being distinct. Not only can we perceive them as being distinct, but they have cause and effect. This is, properly speaking, a world. So, just to take a step back for a second, we say that there's an infinite amount of worlds. And we say that there's an infinite amount of worlds above Atzilus. Are these worlds too? Do they contain Eichales? Do they contain spheres? So, the answer is that they do, to some extent. But as you go higher and higher, the lines of these things keep on getting more and more blurred. I don't want to focus too much on this because it gets into... we could get completely sidetracked, and I don't want this share to take too long. But it's important to note that worlds above, as you go up, these lines keep on getting vaguer and vaguer, but ultimately all of the elements do exist to some extent. But I know that I'm not able to do this justice just as a passing comment. So I just want to make that clear that there is something going on above Atzilus, but it's too complicated to get into on one foot, or at least not even on one foot. It's too complicated to get into without completely sidelining the rest of the share. So this, says the Frierdiker Rebbe, is why I'm able to tell you that Atzilus is a world. Even though Atzilus really is completely nullified to godliness. Because remember, everything in Atzilus only appreciates that it's a part of godliness. It doesn't appreciate any sense of self. Nevertheless, Atzilus is still a world because you have all the elements that you need for a world. You have a space for things to happen. You have all of the entities running around doing their own thing and doing things together. So this is what makes Atzilus a world. So someone asked if we could get a separate comment about Atzilus. About the stuff above Atzilus. Lena, maybe I'll do something supplicatory. I hope that was the right word. About the worlds above Atzilus. But after the share. Mirz Hashem. So, now the Frierdiker Rebbe says that I'm going to explain to you now why Atzilus is called Atzilus, and it'll give us some very good insight into the world of Atzilus and what it is. So, the Frierdiker Rebbe says that in a certain way, Atzilus actually contains itself and it contains its opposite. The word Atzilus is oxymoronic in and of itself. It's not two separate terms that you put together to make an oxymoron, but it's an oxymoron in and of itself. Because Atzilus actually has two different implications, two different definitions perhaps. So, to continue reading, he says, Nikra Atzilus Mishnei Taimim is called Atzilus for two reasons. Aleph, Atzilus Milashain Hatzala V'Hafrasha. It's called Atzilus because it denotes separation. I would just translate separation again. It uses the word Hatzala and Hafrasha. The word Hafrasha is more to let you know what Hatzala means if you're not very familiar. The Atzilus Atzilus is not like something which is made from new, something from nothing, a creation, something from nothing. It's not that. It's only a revelation of the concealed. just to give an example of what you would say about, just to give an example of what you would say about Atzilus, it says in the pasuk about Moshe Rabbeinu, when Hashem told him to make the Sanhedrin, it says that Hashem told him, Vayatzal Ruach, that I'll take off from the spirit that is upon you, and I'll give it to them. Which is to say that Hashem took something kaviyachol from Moshe Rabbeinu, not to say that Moshe Rabbeinu lost. The example given is like when you light a match from another match, the original fire doesn't lose anything, but the second fire does get something. But the point is that something was taken off of Moshe Rabbeinu to be distributed widely, not to be part of him, but to be atzil from him, to be separated from him. As we learned in Sefer Yetzirah, as the spheres glean ma, that the 10 spheres that are like nothing, they're like a flame tied to a coal. That glean ma translation wasn't really that good, but don't worry about it too much. The shalhev is zay hare yashna k'mei shehi b'seich hagachalas. This flame, it is as it is in the center of the coal. V'yashna shalhev is michus lagachalas. And you also have the flame as it exists outside of the coal. The me'ashalheves b'seich hagachalas. Ba shalheves michus lagachalas. From the flame that is within the coal comes the flame that is outside of the coal. V'zeu Atzilus. This is Atzilus. Ha'atzola v'afrasha, to separate and to remove. The einei elo gilei ha'halim milvad, in a way that is only revealing the concealed. So, going into the same example from Sefer Yetzirah gives a similar example to the example Rashi brings about Moshe Rabbeinu taking a match and lighting another match, but it's framed in a more particular way for the purposes of describing Atzilus, which is that Atzilus is taking away in a way that's really only revealing what's there. In the same way that when you have a coal that's on fire, an ember if you will, and it contains within itself fire, which is to say that it contains within itself enough heat that it's able to light anything, definitely more than 451 degrees Fahrenheit. And when you hit the ember, when you hit the coal, a fire will come forth. Now, really what you've done is you've taken the fire out of its source. And really the fire now is, if you will, it's a separate entity. It's hard to pick it up as just the fire. You need to have something that it's latching onto. But ultimately the fire is its own thing. It looks distinct. It's much more colorful than just a coal or a burning ember. You've taken the fire, you've taken it out of the coal, and it looks distinct, and it is distinct. It's a fire. It's not in the same location as the coal. It's something else. It's something different. But ultimately, that's what Atzilus is. Atzilus is that you have divinity, and you have Hashem as he exists perfectly on his own, and Atzilus is, it's separated, it's distinct, it's a world, it's its own existence, it has a space and it has everything that goes on inside of it with distinct entities. True that everything feels godliness, the same way, the fire is the same temperature as what's going on inside the coal, maybe even a little bit colder, but it's fire, it's that same reaction. But it's still a distinct entity at this point. So that's one definition of Atzilus, that's one definition of the root word of Atzal, to separate, Hatzola and Hafrasha. The second definition of Atzilus is Atzilus l'shem etzli v'samoch. Atzilus is from the language of next to it, close and near. The ha'atzala v'ha'afrasha, the Atzilus hu etzli v'samoch ala matzil baruch hu. That the separation and the distinction of Atzilus, even though it's separate and distinct, but at the same time, it's close to Hashem. It's close to the one that was separated from. V'hainu, that is to say, the miyoisei atzala v'ha'afrasha, even though it is separation and distinction, that is not to say that it is a complete separation as is understood by human intellect. It is close and it is near to that which it was separated from. This is why Atzilus is referred to metaphorically as a private domain. Reshus HaYachid is a classic term in halachic literature. It refers to a private domain as far as the prohibition of carrying on Shabbos goes. But Atzilus is referred to metaphorically as Reshus HaYachid, as a private domain. And also Reshus HaYachid comes up in other places in halachic literature. But the point is that it's close to Hashem, it's the Reshus of Hashem, it's the Reshus of the Yachid. The Iuv Chayu Ichad, the Iuv Kamu Ichad. because Hashem and His vitality is one, Hashem and His causations are one, and when we say Hashem and His causations, depending on which level you're referring to, but one of the levels that we could say that the causation that Hashem is referring to is the world of Atzilus, that it's something which is itaka, it's separate from Him, it's a causation, it's not Him Himself, Kav Yachol. But ultimately, He is one with it, He is united with it. The world completely expresses godliness, everything in the world feels completely nullified to godliness. It's very close to Him, even though it's distinct at the same time. So that's the world of Atzilus, and that already gives us, I think, a decent grasp of Atzilus to a certain extent. At least now we understand why Atzilus is called Atzilus, and that's what the Frierdiker Rebbe is starting out over here with. He's saying, I need to tell you the defining features of each world. Not to get into all of the specifics, but just, this is why Atzilus is Atzilus, because it's both close and near to Hashem. It's both close and distinct from Hashem. Moving on to the world of Beriyah. The Frierdiker Rebbe said, funny enough, that Beriyah has a similar kind of deal, in which the word Beriyah has two definitions which are both applicable to the world of Beriyah. Olam Beriyah, or Olam Hasheni, and there are about Olamis. It's the second world of the four worlds. V'nikra Olam HaBeriyah, liyosi mitzios harishona, acharei Atzilus, liyosi mitzios. It's called Beriyah because it is the first existence after the world of Atzilus. That is to say, that it is actually an existence. It feels like an existence. Hagam shu ruchni, even though it's a spiritual world, and it's still part of the order of concealed worlds. It's a world which isn't properly visible, isn't properly applicable down here. And in Beriyah, there is a shine of the light of Atzilus. And particularly the sphere of Bina of Atzilus shines over there, something which I believe we'll get to in Message Hashem later, but isn't particularly relevant for right now. But ultimately the point is that, Beriyah does have a very close relationship with Atzilus. It's directly emanating from it. As mentioned before, that Malchus of Atzilus literally becomes Kesser of Beriyah. The lowest level of Atzilus becomes the highest level of Beriyah. So there's a very close interplay between Atzilus and Beriyah. So Beriyah is really a very spiritual place. Kiva and the Frierdiker Rebbe interjects, Kiva Olam Atzilus, Atzmei Meir Gilui Disperes Chochmah Atzilus, V'lachei Nikras Olam HaBeriyah, Olam HaAsaga, that the world of Atzilus shines a revelation of Chochmah Atzilus, and but the Frierdiker Rebbe after that interjection has another interjection that this is the reason why the world of Beriyah is called the world of Asaga, because it relates to Bina, but these are all things which we're going to get to in Message Hashem in later Shiurim. But for right now, that was all an interjection. But the Frierdiker Rebbe, so just to back up a second, I'll read that paragraph again without the interjection. So he says, even though Beriyah is a spiritual world, and a light of the world, or a revelation of the light of Atzilus, is revealed in Beriyah, so it's a completely spiritual place. But nevertheless, nevertheless, it's called a world of creation, it's called a world of existence, for two reasons. Aleph, the difference between the world of Beriyah and the world of Atzilus is, even though there's a lot of different reasons why they might be distinct, one of the reasons for the distinction is the world of Atzilus is called a nothing which is not understood, it's not grasped. The world of Beriyah is an existence, it's able to be grasped intellectually. And the reason for this is because Beriyah is actually an existence. And Mitzios is called Beriyah, existence is called creation. As the Ramban writes in his commentary to the beginning of Chumash Bereshis, that we do not have any word for creating something from nothing in the holy tongue other than the word bara. The word bara, the word creation, means to make something, to make an existence, to make an entity that really truly exists out of nothing, to make it from a non-existence. That is what the word bara denotes. That is to say, the Hevdal HaBeriyah me'Atzilusu, the difference between Beriyah from Atzilus is Hagam d'chol ha'inyanim sheyashnam b'Atzilus, even though all of the things that we have in Atzilus that we listed before, they make it a world. Heicholes, Esosires, Eris v'chelim v'chulu. That is to say, Heicholes, the 10 spheres, the lighting vessels, etc. Which, by the way, this is the thing that I was referencing before. There's a note from the Rebbe, if I'm not mistaken, over here, that says that you need to put in the word Merkava over there, and it needs to be in that order. So just a throwback to, I don't know, maybe half an hour ago. So Beriyah contains within itself all of these things that Atzilus contains, that makes it a world. But nevertheless, Yeshnam Gam B'Elam Beriyah, they're all in the world of Beriyah. Nevertheless, Atzilus in Atzilus, it is only a revelation of what is concealed. It's not to say that now it's in existence. By Atzilus, Hashem contains every element in the universe. Everything is from Hashem. Atzilus is a kind of revelation of that. But Atzilus is still Etzli v'Salmuch. It's still close to Hashem. It's still near to Hashem. And everything is an existence of godliness over there. There's no feeling of distinction. There's no feeling of I exist. Atzilus is all Hashem exists. There is no me to say I exist. In Beriyah is a step down to say that now things feel like they exist. All of these things are there, and not only that, but they feel like their own existence. Liyosim Mitzios, seeing as it is in existence. Hagamshu Mitzios Daka V'Ma'id, even though it is a very thin existence. That is to say, a very refined existence. The commercial cost of Ramban, as the Ramban himself writes, Yisoy Dak Ein Bei Mamash, a thin element which contains no essence. It contains nothing that could be touched or manipulated. And its whole existence is only that maybe down the line it's able to be formed into something else. That's what we call foreshadowing about the world of Yetzirah. It's able to be formed into something else. It's like a matter that you're able to form, that you're able to down the line give it some kind of form. But nevertheless, it's in existence. And the fact that it feels its own existence, that it is actually in existence, even to this very refined extent, even to this extent where the only defining feature about it that makes it different and distinct from Atzilus is that it has this existence, but that level of existence is enough to make it its own world, in the scheme of worlds flowing into each other, that Atzilus is now no longer, the term Atzilus can't apply over here, once you've come to the point of now the world exists, even though the world doesn't have form yet, the world doesn't have practicality yet, it's just that the notion of existence. But that notion of existence is enough that it warrants being called its own world. That's all the first definition of Beriyah. The Frierdiker Rebbe gives another brief definition of Beriyah, which I think is very interesting. He says, Shem Beriyah choyna al davar agali. The word Beriyah refers to something which is revealed. K'maimer yashuv laketz v'veshet in choshesh shema hivri. As it says a very random line in Maseches Chulin, and it's also brought in the Aruch, in the Erech of Beriyah, if I'm not mistaken, that it says that if a thorn was in the esophagus of an animal, you don't need to be concerned. Maybe the thorn came to the outside of the esophagus. A very technical law, where it just uses the word hivri to mean comes outside. So the Frierdiker Rebbe says, Perish hivri yatsa l'chutz. The explanation of the word hivri is that it came outside. Chutz bara, as in the Aramaic translation in Onkelos and other translators of the word chutz, which literally translates to outside, is bara. Seeing as the world of Beriyah is a world of existence, an existence that comes to the outside, that is why the world of Beriyah is called Beriyah. Because now you're able to look at it, and now it has an outward facing appearance. Atzilus was all just Hashem, and there's no outside of Hashem. To say that there's an outside facing appearance. Beriyah, now, there's something, kaviyachol, outside of Hashem, that's able to put on its own face. So the world of Beriyah is actually, it faces outside, and as such it's called the world of Beriyah, because bar means outside. Onto the world of Yetzirah. Olam HaYetzirah, Olam HaShlishi. The world of Yetzirah is the third world. Barba Elamis, in the four worlds. Even though it has all of the entities, all of the concepts of Beriyah and Atzilus, the existence of the world of Yetzirah is to a greater extent than in the world of Beriyah. Why? The whole existence that we said of the world of Beriyah is very refined. It's only the fact that now you have an existence when before you didn't. The whole existence of Beriyah was only the fact that in theory it's able to have some kind of form. But not that it's a complete, well-formed existence. The word form is coming up a lot over here, but it's really the perfect word to use. The world of Beriyah wasn't that it had some kind of form. It was just something exists. There's some kind of existence. Yetzirah is that it has. I'm getting ahead of myself. Beriyah is it's only the first matter. It's the first thing that you may be able to form into some kind of existence. It still has some level of existence, but it's only the matter for it. The world of Yetzirah contains entities which have full forms. It's practical. You can look at it and you can distinguish between entities based on how they look. They all have a form. It's called the world of Yetzirah for two reasons. Aleph, because now it's a complete existence. That's one reason why it merits to have its own world, to be termed its own world, as distinct from Beriyah. And Beis, it has its own form. Things have their own form. So that's the world of Yetzirah. One more paragraph. Hashem. The world of Asiyah is the fourth world in the scheme of the four worlds. And even though Asiyah has all of the things that we said in the worlds of Yetzirah, Beriyah, and Atzilus, and you think at this point of Yetzirah, what more can you add? Everything it's a matter. It has form. It exists. It has all of the Chasidic and the Merkava and the Chasidic and Merkava, the Yetzirah, the Eres, the Kalim, the Mechin, the Mides. It has everything in it. What more can we add to Asiyah? So the Frierdiker Rebbe says, one more thing we could add. Asiyah is the lowest world. Somewhere before the lowest world, you still have all of these concepts of having form and having matter and having Kehos and everything that you have higher. But there's one point below when everything now is practical. Everything now exists the way that we're perceiving things now. A world of Asiyah. That you don't see malachim swimming around or wherever the malachim are doing. We just see the world in its final form, where you look around, you see pictures on the wall, you see a floor and you see a ceiling, and a desk and a laptop and whatever else it is that you have in front of you. You have an actual real world, and this is the final level. There's nothing below it. That is what makes Asiyah distinct. The fact that it is at the bottom, the fact that it is the lowest. And the Frierdiker Rebbe explains why it's called Asiyah. Maybe you should call it Erdem HaTachtin. I mean, we do call it Erdem HaTachtin very often, but usually Erdem HaTachtin. But he says, why is it called Asiyah? It's called Asiyah after the word Maisa. Because Maisa, whenever you come to any kind of resolution, the final thing that you do after a resolution, the last point of the resolution is what you do about it. Asiyah, action, is the culmination of everything that precedes the action. Whatever thoughts you had about it, whatever knowledge you have about it, whatever feelings you have about it, whatever thoughts, whatever you said about it, everything comes down to action. Action is the last thing in any culmination. So the world of Asiyah is called Asiyah, not because it's a world of action. You can do things in Yetzirah, you can do things in Beriyah. It's called Asiyah because it is the last thing, it is the final. It is the final expression of Hashem's creation, and this is the practical. So it's always nice to think, what lessons are we able to take out of what we're learning? And I think maybe a lesson that we could take just from right here at the end is that this world that we live in has so much that goes on above it. You have Atzilus, and each level brings something new to the table. But ultimately, our world is the world of practicality. Our world is the world of action. Our world is the lowest, but it's the lowest not because it's low. It's the lowest because it's the culmination of everything on top of it. So we should be able to take everything that we've learned, and we should be able to use it to push us forward in Aveda, that we should be able to actually do in this world, to do good things, to do Torah and mitzvahs, and have Avos Yisrael and limit the Torah. And so that concludes what I've prepared to say for today. If anyone has any questions, by all means, now would be a good time for questions. Yeah, 100%. There are levels to 100%. There are levels of Asiyah, But Asiyah is everything that takes place in Asiyah. It's like you could say, I'm on Earth. I could go deeper into Earth, but ultimately it's all taking place in the realm of Earth. Whatever it is that happens in Asiyah is all in the same level of perception of reality. And Eretz Hashem we're going to get to more than just the terminologies of the worlds, but what does it mean when we say Atzilus? As of right now, we still have the question of where is Atzilus? If I go a few thousand miles up and to the left, am I going to hit Atzilus? So we still need to get to that, which ultimately will explain the concept of how you have lower levels in Asiyah. But ultimately, there are different levels in Asiyah, but Asiyah is the flattest realm, the flattest world.